Hello, Keith Ruck here at VintageMachinery.org. So this time I think what we're going to work on is getting our quick change gearbox all reassembled. So in the previous video on the quick change, of course, we took everything apart, took all the parts out of it, we cleaned everything up real good, gave the actual casting here a nice new paint job to match the lathe, and now it's time to put it all back together. So with any luck, we'll get it all back like we took it apart. So let's tear in here and get going. So reassembly of this is exact opposite of how we took it apart, and that's basically what we're going to start working on here. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to put our ABCD selector back in here, and tell you what, we got a little oil. I'm going to go ahead and put a little oil in here as we're reassembling things. Just makes things work a little better. I'm mostly just working that back and forth to spread that oil out. So with that in, come around to the inside here. Oops. And this little bracket here goes on, and my tapered pin. Take my hammer, reseat that. All right. Now when I took this apart, there's a set screw right here, and that set screw was missing, but I have replaced it. And I want to go ahead and tighten that down on there as well. So the next step here is we want to put this shaft in, and this shaft holds the tumbler on the outside that slides on it. So first thing I need to do is kind of fish this tumbler back in through here. Alright, that's good for right now. Again, I want to take this shaft and just kind of put a little oil on it, lubricate it. It's going to come in here. It's got to feed through there. Now there's a little bushing that goes on this end, and that fits up inside of a set of roller bearings here. There's a set of roller bearings in this cap on the end. There's also this hole here, and this hole lines up. There's a little pin that comes in the front that will engage in that and keep that from spinning. So I need to make sure I'm getting that aligned in. So let's get everything lined up here. Okay. Going in. Went just a little bit too far. I'm looking at where my hole is lining up here in the front, and I'm going to have to just mess with that a little bit to get it lined up. But I got my tumbler is installed, so let me fiddle with this a minute and we'll be right back. So I got looking down in here, and I can see how this thing aligns. It was just a tad too far. That's pretty darn close right there. Let's see if we can knock that in there. Yeah. And there's another pin over here. I didn't remove this boss on the other end, but there's another pin that goes there. So let me go ahead and put that one back in. There we go. So those should now be good. And our tumbler is tumbling and going to the correct or whatever selection we want. So that all looks good. Now what holds all this in is just this little screw-on thrust bearing here on the end. It's adjustable to adjust the thrust in this to get it where it spins without really sliding back and forth. So I'll have to get something to hold that. Hang on a second. All right, we got that. All right, we're holding on the other end. Again, I've got a little, one little piece in here where I can get this punch into to tighten it up. And you want to get it, you know, where it's tight but free spinning. That's just a little bit too much. See, that feels good. And there's not any end in play. So now I'm going to go ahead and lock down these set screws. And just so you know, these set screws are going in here, but in the bottom, the set screw's not actually clamping down right on that thread. There's actually a little brass plug in the bottom that is threaded as well, and that's what's engaging on the that threaded shaft so it doesn't gall it up. But these set screws will tighten it in place and keep it from coming off in operation. All right, I like that. Feels good. So the next assembly to go in is going to be the gear on the bottom, and this is what's going to be selected on the bottom selector, the ABCD selector. And there's all these components go on the shaft. I had put it all back on here when I cleaned it. I've taken them apart now in the order that they go back on so that I can assemble them back together. So first thing I want to do is there's this little brass pad back here. This fits in that selector. That engages in this little slot right here, and as you move that back and forth, it slides this gear on the shaft. So we got that in there. Now, again, I've washed this in the parts washer. We've got all the old oil and grease out of it. Right in this area is a set of needle bearings, and I want to make sure those start out with a good coat of oil on them. So I'm just going to put some in there, lube it up real good. That feels pretty good. Okay. This shaft is what goes out to the feed rod on the lathe. So this is basically the output shaft. The one above it is the input shaft that comes from the headstock. So as we're doing this, I want to, again, this gear is going to be sliding on there, so I'm going to oil up the inside, put a little oil there in that groove. Let me, probably going to be in your way. Come around the back side and see if I can do this. So I'm lining up the keyway. I've got that in the slot. Well, I thought I was lining up the keyway. There it is. I want to lubricate that shaft real well. All right, so that one goes on. Next to that is this little thrust bearing. It goes right here, and then this gear that's idles on here will go on. Put a little oil down here. And this end down here, there's another needle bearing down here, so I'm going to oil that up real good as well. And soft blow hammer, tap that in. All right. That feels good. My selector is sliding that one side to the other, which is just what I want. Now the last part is on this end again, we've got another collar that's got the 2 set screws in it just like before, and we'll tighten that up on the end. So now we want to put in the other 2 sets of gears here, and again we got needle bearings on either side, so I want to oil these up really good, and these just fit right up on there. So go ahead and just put those on. I'm going to drop that gear train in there. That gear train goes in here. Notice that none of these gears touch. They engage on this end. And let's see, it goes this way like such. Okay. And now this whole assembly, with any luck, should fit up on here. Sorry, I'm in the way of the camera. My soft blow hammer. Tap that in place. Before I tighten it down, yeah, everything's turning. So that's good. So I'll go ahead and put the bolts in. So if you remember from the previous video, this bottom bolt was broken, and I was worried about that. I didn't know how much trouble it was going to be to get that bolt out. Turned out it was really, really simple. It just came right out. In fact, I was able to just screw it out with my fingers. The problem is now is that one is about 1.25 inches long, or was it 2 1/4, whatever, but or 1/8. So this is, I think, a 2 inch, this is 2 1/8, and that's 2 1/4. It's in between the lengths. So I'm hoping that this longer one will go in here and tighten down. If not, I may have to improvise. All right, we got them all tightened up. That little bit longer bolt looks like it went in just fine. Everything is spinning. And we have this back together. This is ready to go back on the lathe now, I do believe. Before I put the gearbox on, I want to do a little bit more painting over here, a little detail work. So I want to highlight the LeBlond leathers here in black. I'm going to be doing a gray and black combination paint on this. Also, I've decided all the handles and levers and everything on here, I'm also going to paint black. And we painted this gray when we were going in here, so I'm going to go ahead and get that painted black as well. And it's just going to be easier to do this before the quick change attachment goes on. The gearbox goes on, because it's just going to be in the way. So I've got some black paint here, and I think I'm going to start with the fine letters here, and I'm just using a little artist paintbrush. And this is just tedious work, and all I'm going to do is just and there's two schools of thought. I can either paint just the tops of the letters, or I can paint the whole embossed area that sticks up. I think I'm just going to go with a finer line. I think that's going to look a little classier. in a real big bold line. I think I'm happy with that. So next thing I want to do is get a little bit bigger paintbrush here, and I masked off around this just to protect it some in case I get careless with my brush. I wish I had a little bit smaller brush, but I don't. I may have to go back in here and do a little touch up with the gray in there with a fine brush after this dries, but I'm happy with that. All right, we're going to leave well enough alone. I'm going to let this dry overnight before we put the gearbox on. We'll do that tomorrow. I think we're ready to go ahead and put the quick change gearbox back on now. So, you know, we got the painting done, got this painted, went ahead and put the oil filler spout back in. I had taken this out to clean it, and you really can't put this in with the quick change gearbox up here. So anyway, I got all that done, and I did a little touch-up painting on the quick change gearbox. There we go. Okay, that's got that first one started. See if we can get this side going here. I think that's started maybe. All right, they're all started, so let me go ahead and tighten these 4 bolts up, and that'll be mounted. All right, I think we got it done. So she's starting to take shape. Looks a lot better. Did a little cleaning and polishing on some of that bare metal. Went ahead and highlighted the oil daily letters on here. Again, just kind of makes it pop, makes it look a little bit better, I think. But coming together. Let's continue on. So the next step here is we want to go ahead and get this linkage put back in here that goes back in the back. This will be back behind all the feed rods and everything, and now's the time to do it. So first one is this one here, and I'm going to take that off. This rod comes up and actually will connect in here. Okay, well, let me go ahead and get this put in. Pin that goes in there. I'm gonna have to touch that paint up later on. Just painted it yesterday, so some of this paint is still just a little bit on the soft side. Also need to get another cotter pin. We're gonna put that one in the back, and we'll put one in the front later on. All right, that part's in, and there's a nut that goes on the back. I'm gonna hand tighten it now, and I'll get in here. This is just hard to get into. I'll tighten these up off camera. I have to get in there with a socket wrench, but just finger tight right now. Okay, so that linkage is in place. The next piece that goes on here is this little piece here. This is a little spring-loaded part, and basically there's 3 positions on this linkage, and this engages in 3 little detents there. It's spring-loaded. There we go. Very good. And same thing, there's a nut behind there, and we'll get that tightened up off camera. But that linkage is now back in place. And like I said, I need to touch up some paint right here and get a cotter pin in there. Well, I got a little bit ahead of myself. I had put this little piece back here in, and I got to looking at things, and I'm like, well, hang on a minute, I think that I need to put that in a little bit later. So I went ahead and cleaned up all the screws and rods that go on here, and a couple of them need a little bit of paint, so I painted them, did that off camera, let the paint dry for a little while, and while I was letting that paint dry, I went back and watched my video when I took it apart, and sure enough, this part needed to go on a little bit later. So anyway, I'm come back now, it's been a few hours, and I'm ready to put this first piece on. So this paint's been drying probably 3 to 4 hours, but as you can see, it's still just a little bit tacky, but I think it's going to be fine. But this piece goes down here. That rod comes out that way. And I'm going to go ahead and get these started. All right, that's got that piece back on. And this is the lever that goes down to the carriage, and there's a rod that goes through the machine to the back, and this is what engages the spindle. So there's a handle on the carriage that engages the spindle, and that's what this whole setup does. The next piece to go on here is the reversing rod, and there's a little spiral gear that kind of goes into, and this just, it moves about that far. There's a handle that rotates it on the carriage, and that goes to that little arm that sits down over here that again goes to some linkages. So that's back on, and now with that on, we can put our arm back in here that we just took back off. So this fits down over top of that little yoke does. And let me get my hammer where I can tap that back in. There we go. So I'll reconnect all my linkages up here now. This piece will come back down and tighten up on there. First, let me get a nut on the back, and then we'll hook all that back up. Well, guys, I think I just figured something out, and I'm going to take a minute and share this because it makes a difference on this part that I just put on. And when I put it in there, I got to thinking about it. I said, well, that thing could go in 6 possible ways. I said, does it matter which way I put it in there? And I had gone back and looked at my pictures, and there was a piece on here that I was referencing to make sure I was putting it in the same way I took it off. But then I got thinking about this part right here. And this is the handle that goes on the side of the carriage on the lathe that's got a lever on here that allows you to move this up and down. It turns at a quarter of a turn and basically engages it and disengages it. So when I got the lathe, this part was off the carriage. And I said, I wonder why. Is there something wrong with it? Well, I know just from looking at how things are on this machine taken apart that this has been into before. So someone had taken all this apart and previously, and when they put it back together, they didn't get that part in right there in the right orientation, and they didn't figure it out until they were way down here putting the carriage on. And at that point in time, they probably said, you know what, it's going to be a pain in the butt to have to take all this stuff back apart and put it back on, you know, take it apart, put it back together. And they came up with a different way of doing this. I caught it. So I took this part, I studied the positions of the keyway in here, studied the positions down here. I had to take it back apart, but I've got this shaft put in properly now where it should work with this part, which I want to get it back going. And I wanted to just stop there and mention that because if somebody else is dealing with this same LeBlond lathe, pay attention to this to make sure you get this rod oriented in the right slot. Like I said, there's 6 possible positions it can go in. Only one of them is correct. So next piece to go back in will be this gear. And of course that's going to be in the way. Please don't tell me I have to take that back off again. So back over here at the lathe, they say confession's good for the soul. Well, I had to get this gear on, and I went to slide it on, and it wouldn't fit over this bracket. So I had to take this stinking bracket off again. I was so frustrated, I just did it off camera. But anyway, again, if you're restoring a LeBlond lathe like this gear here goes on before this goes on, so don't make that mistake. One thing that's kind of funky is I got this little grease zerk right here. I think I mentioned this when I took it apart. I went ahead and greased that real good before I put the gear on because there is no possible way to get a grease gun on that grease zerk. I'm wondering if that may not be something somebody put in after the fact without seeing how it all went together. But anyway, a little oil in here I think would do the same thing. But we're ready now to put the next piece on here. And basically, this is the feed rod. This is what's going to actually power the feed and get that in there. And I'm just going to use a punch here, a little drift punch to try to get that lined up. I think that is lined up now. And the taper pin goes in and that will hold it in place. All right, so that one's back on, which leaves the last one, which is going to be the threading screw. And here we go, we're going to put this in. It just basically comes right in here. Whoops, that bracket's on, goes on that way. Looks like. Yeah. All right, I think both of those are started. All right, again, this just engages, slides on and off. When you want to engage the lead screw, disengage it, you just slide that gear off. All right, I think we got all of our screws back installed. Well, I thought I'd give you guys a peek of what I'm dealing with out here in the shop. It's my shop thermometer. Reading about 104 degrees right now, about 40 degrees Celsius. It's hot. When you factor in the heat or the humidity, I went and actually looked up the humidity a while ago, which is about 48% right now, which at outside temperature is about 96, 97. But when you put the humidity on top of that 104, it comes out right around 130 degrees Fahrenheit or about 55 degrees Celsius. In other words, it's hot. But I've been out at the museum today driving the steam locomotive, and it was about 130, 140 degrees up in the cab, sitting on top of that boiler, even without the humidity. So this actually feels pretty cool to me right now, although I am sweating. Let's get back to work. So we've got the quick change gearbox pretty well installed now. Everything's back on here. I got this linkage that goes to the back through there. Did that off camera. But while I'm on this end, I'm gonna go ahead and put all the knobs and handles and stuff back on here. So just so you'll know, and I did most of this off camera, but I took all of these pieces like this that needed to be cleaned up, and I just put them in the bead blaster, and we sandblasted them, and then they were painted. So that's basically how I got them all cleaned up. To get these pins aligned, you can just run a little tapered punch down in there, like such, and that'll get them in line, and then you can drive your pin in. This one comes in from this direction, and that is the lever that engages and disengages the spindle. All right. Next is this piece, and this just slides up on this shaft, and it goes to a kind of a rack and pinion on the inside that moves some gears around. All right. That feels good. Then there's another knob that goes on here like such. Let me get my tapered punch. And drive that pin home. Alright, so these are two levers are independent of each other, and there's different settings for different gear selections in here. Alright, those are on. So I'm driving these on with a soft blow hammer, guys. So it should keep anything from being damaged in the process here. Alright, that's just a A-B selector, and I nicked it with the hammer there and there. I'll have to touch that up, but no big deal. But that's got all my knobs put back on. She's starting to look like a lathe again. But she's really starting to look good now. Pretty much this end of the machine is done, I guess. Can't think of anything else that needs to be done on this end. So everything's back on here. The quick change gearbox is in place. We got all of our rods and everything back installed. Got all of our handles back installed. And I think she's looking fabulous. So next things we got to do is I want to do a good job leveling this lathe before we really start putting the carriage back together. That'll probably be a video, and then we'll start putting the carriage back together and then the tailstock back together. And we should be done and ready to fire up. So moving right along, making some progress on the LeBlond lathe restoration. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. You can go back and watch the other videos in this series if you haven't already. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I always appreciate subscriptions. And leave me a comment, give me a like button. All those things are good. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you guys later.